So, welcome back to our course on transformational leadership, strategy, and governance. Having just taken a look at the state of affairs in the world, the complexity of all of that, we're now going to offer you a map that helps to navigate through the complexity. So with all of the information that's out there, everything that gets thrown at us, theories from here, we're aware of so much, and via the internet we can find information on all sorts of things. The question is, how do we make sense of it, and how do we know what is right in what context? And that's why we at Ubiquity are using the integral framework to help us make sense of all the complexity and navigate our way through. So I expect you'll have come across this in different contexts. Different teachers will explain it in different ways. And it's nice to hear different perspectives on it. And it helps you, if you didn't get one piece from one person, to get another piece from a different teacher. So I'm going to explain it to you in the way I understand it. And I hope that adds to your perception of what it means to take an integral approach to things. So as we look at this core framework of the four quadrants here, there are four main axes to it. One is the interior, another is exterior, another is individual, and another is collective. So as we zoom in on the individual interior, that points to what is actually going on inside of us as individuals. So the interior dimensions are the dimensions we can't see just with our eyes, that we can't measure with our normal instruments, but they're our subjective experience of reality. So at this very moment, thoughts are going through your heads. You may be feeling certain emotion. Maybe your tummy's rumbling, or all sorts of things are going on in your interiors. And that's what this quadrant is pointing to. It's saying that we all have our filters, our way of seeing the world, our values, things which you can't get to by just looking at somebody, but you actually have to talk to them to find out more about what's going on inside of them. So, and that is an important, very important part of reality that we don't often pay enough attention to. So that's that upper left quadrant there, the interior of the individual. As we move across to the right, to the exterior, that's still with the individual, but it's our physical organism and our behavior. So it's things, you could go to the doctor, they give you a checkup. They can measure things without even talking to you. It's things that people can see about you by just observing you, either just by looking at you or with various instruments. And that tells people what your organism is doing, how you're showing up in the world. And so that's the exterior dimension of the individual, also very important, because we can hold certain values or beliefs in our interior, but if we don't match those with authentic behavior in the world, if we don't walk our talk and have this personal alignment across our interiors and our exteriors, then there's a lack of congruence in the way we show up in the world. So important to be mapping both dimensions there, what happens in me and how do I actually act, behave, and show up in the world. If we move down to the lower left quadrant, then we're at the interiors again, but this time of the collective. So what are the invisible dimensions of us when we get together as collectives in organizations, in families, in bigger cultures? Things like our values that we hold together, the kind of unspoken agreements that we have with each other in different contexts. Things, again, which you can't just know by looking at the way a collective behaves, but you have to start asking why people behave in certain ways. What are the things they hold to be true? And that's what gets us to the interiors. They're what motivates a collective, a group, a culture, a society, an organization to do things in a certain way. So you can see why that's very important, because if we're trying to change the behavior of something, we need to really engage the motivation for that behavior. So really get into the reason people are behaving in certain ways. So that's the lower left, the interior of the collective, the culture. And then moving across to the right, we move to the exterior of the collective. So all the things that we see around us, the way we collectively organize ourselves, the architecture that we build, the planning of the city, the laws that we make, everything that you can go and study about a society, an organization, a community, a family, again, just by observing it, taking a look at it, without ever talking to anybody. You just see all of these artifacts that we create in our collectives, which are, of course, heavily informed by the lower left. Those structures and systems that we create on the right are like the house that we inhabit. So they very much define what is possible for us and how we go about doing things. So it's an important element to be considering always. We can try to change our shared values and the way we think about things, but we also really need to focus on the structures, the processes, the agreements that we have with each other, the way we design our physical spaces. All of those impact the way we live together. So any change initiative, any attempt to create change needs to take all four of these perspectives into account. If you just try to change somebody's motivation inside, but you don't test that with behavior change, then they can be thinking differently but acting the same, and you haven't affected the change. Likewise, if you send people on a behavior change program, but you don't deal with the motivation behind the behavior, you're not going to get the change. If you send people away on a course and they work on themselves, but they come back to an organization or a community that still has the same values and structures, then they're going to fall back into those collective patterns. So you've got to shift the collective at the same time if you're going to get the individual behavior too. And so what becomes important to look at is not just these quadrants individually, but how they relate to each other. So the personal alignment between my interior reality and my behavior. The values alignment that exists between me and my context. Am I aligned with the shared values that we have in our community or organization, or is there a tension there? The structural alignment. So how does the systems and structures of our society or our organization reflect the shared values that we hold? Are those in alignment, or is there some tension in that relationship? And then how does my behavior fit into the structures around me? Because if I'm breaking those rules, then I'm going to get into trouble. So how do we look for that alignment? And as we inquire into the quality of the alignment, take that information as an impulse to shift something. So what's very important to be aware of is these four quadrants are continually arising and evolving at the same time. So all four of these perspectives, as Ken Wilber would call them, who came up with the theory originally, these are four different perspectives, always on the same moment, the same reality. So always there's something happening in me. I have a mindset, a way of looking. I'm behaving in some way. My physical organism is doing something. I'm embedded in a set of collective values, and I'm embedded in some kind of structure all the time at every moment. And this just ensures, as we hold these four quadrants, that we're covering all the bases as we try to make sense of something that's going on and as we try to plan our interventions.